Hello everyone. Today I welcome you to the class for Introduction to Polymers. I will be taking two classes on polymers. Today is the first one where we will be discussing about some physical and chemical aspects of polymers. So polymers are large molecules or macromolecules comprising of large number of repeating units which we call monomer covalently bonded to each other, which could be same or which could be different, uh, which means we have subunits or units which repeat on their structure. It may be that a single unit is repeating itself, or otherwise multiple units are repeating itself, but it has a repeating order. So if these monomers are forming a molecule or a macromolecule in the order of 500 to 1000 monomer subunits, we call it oligomer, or beyond 1000 monomer units we mostly call them a polymer. A polymer could be a natural origin or synthetic. Like, so for example, say polyethylene is a synthetic polymer, but a polypeptide is a natural polymer. They can be from highly crystalline up to 90% to completely amorphous. Their property can differ according to the molecular weight, crystallinity, formation procedure and chemical modification, even if the precursors are similar. I have kept structure of two polymers here as example, like which are very common, like polyethylene and polylactide chlorhydrochloric acid. Both of them are very much common and used a lot in biomedical industries. So in the today's class, we are not going to talk much about the biomaterials directly aspects of polymers, because polymers are the largest group of materials which are used in medical industries. So I will take a separate class completely on related to biomaterial aspects of different polymers. So today we will be talking about briefly the chemical and physical properties of polymers, which influence, we will see that directly and indirectly it's going to influence the biomaterial properties of a polymer also. So we can classify polymers or distinguish polymers on the basis of nature of repeat units, structural characteristics, its stereochemistry, molecular or functional group classification, trade names, physical properties, end uses, polymerization process and whatnot. So if we start about from the beginning or the monomeric units, we can say that the repeat units, how they are distributed or how varied they were. On the basis of that, we can differentiate directly between into two classes of polymer. It is homopolymer, where a single unit is again and again repeating to form the polymer, or otherwise it could be copolymer, where multiple units like two different or three different kind of monomeric units or chemical subunits are joining together to form a polymer. Now, say for example here we can see, so there are two different repeat units, say A and B, or here's the white and black. So there are different group of copolymers, like alternating copolymers, where one A, one B, then one A, one B, alternately they are getting arranged. Or it could be block copolymer, where there is like A, some 5 units of A, then 5 units of B, again 5 units of A. It could be like that. It could be randomly arranged, like 2A, then 3B, and then 1A, 1B. In that way it could be arranged. And it could be grafted, like there is a complete chain of A in which there are certain positions where a group of B or a chain of B is attached. Again, there is, after some time, there is one more repetition. This is called graft polymer. Structural characteristics of closely related material properties. So same polymer can be developed into different characteristics, as well as their by branching and grafting different structures can be obtained. Like for example, it could be linear, like say polyethylene or PVC or polyamides. It could be branch, like say low density polyethylene. So polyethylene, if it is allowed to grow continuously into a very high density polymeric chain, then it gets a polyethylene. But say for example, if it gets branch here and there, then its structure remains in the lower density level. So that is a branched polymer. Then it could be networked, like it could be interconnected chains, that is called cross-linked or network polymers like epoxies and rubbers. This cross-link is a very important term. When I will talk about the biomaterial aspect, this you will realize that cross-link is a very important term in terms of polymer processing. So advanced chemical synthesis has developed different polymeric structure. There could be block copolymer, there could be star copolymer, comb polymer, brush-like structures. There could be dendrimers, there could be star block copolymer. So the same polymer, by design, by chemistry, we can modify it to different kind of structures for different applications. There comes another group or another property which is called stereochemistry of the side pendant group around the chiral center. So if we think in this way, that there is a straight polymer chain is going on, and in the link, while there is a linkage, in each side of the linkage or a monomeric unit, there is a pendant group, say a benzene ring or something like that, or a cyclic compound, or say a tetracycline ring. Now, interestingly, as there is a carbon-carbon linkage, there is a hydrogen, there is one another unit in the forward end, there is one bond, there is backward another bond, there is a pendant group. So basically the carbon in between works as a chiral center. So the arrangement of the side pendant group can actually be considered an important factor in terms of steric properties. So if a chain is randomly arranged, so then it could be like, say, atactic, for its steric property will be something. If it is isotactic, that means the R groups or the functional groups are at the same side of the backbone, then it has different steric properties, and if they are alternate, they have the different steric properties. This actually can be achieved by using different catalysts, and importantly, this isotactic, syndiotactic and atactic polymer of same group can have different properties in terms of mechanical structures, its crystallinity, its mobility, its glass transition temperature, its melting temperature. There are different kind of properties which can be varied just using the tacticity or the stereochemistry of a polymer. Now if we go by the polymer chemistry polymerization process, there are different kind of processes. To name a few, it could be chain or addition polymerization, where what happens is a monomer decreases throughout the reaction. So once there is a starting point or a start of the reaction, it starts growing. Each reaction point, a monomer is activated and the polymerization happens at the end of the chain. So what we get is a longer prolonged chain, and this is called the addition polymerization. We need basically one initiator or a donor molecule which just can activate or cleave the bond and between the monomers, and then it starts reacting. So each point, this kind of activating electrons are either taken or donated, because of which actually it starts getting propagated. Now after a long reaction, either it gets terminated by automatically, or it can leave within the polymer, which is called leaving polymerization, or we use a quencher or a molecule which can actually take away this activated electron, or can donate one more electron so that it can get paired, so that the reaction can be stopped. There are three different kind of such reactions. So they are like cationic, anionic and free radical polymerization. Whereas in the other group, there is condensation polymerization, where what happens is the monomer is consumed early in reaction. So what happens is, like, there are two groups of polymers are there. We give some specific physical or chemical condition, like say heat or something. Then what happens? It starts getting reacting, and it once this reaction happens, something like a small molecule like say water or alcohol is taken out of the system. So this physical factor till when it is available, the reaction goes in the forward direction. So for example, if there is water coming out, and if we take out the water continuously out of the system, that means again the reaction is moving towards forward direction. Whereas if we want to stop it, we can just allow the system to cool, and automatically once that happens, the reaction tends to go towards a slower rate goes slower, and then finally over a period of time it might get stopped. There are other mechanisms also, like applying some materials which can donate water or take out of water can also allow to continue the reaction. The examples are like formation of polyamide and polyesters, where basically in polyester we know that there is esterification reaction between an acid and an alcohol. So if there is a carboxylic acid and there is a diol, then they form a ester linkage, and the further they follow they go on, where in the OH side there is always reaction of a COOH, and the other end it is already conjugated. So in that way the chain increases. Interestingly, while in case of addition polymerization, a single chain starts to grow, whereas in case of a condensation polymerization, mostly the nature of the reaction is there are multiple reaction units starts growing together. So while in case of getting a larger molecule by addition polymerization is easier, it is difficult for to get a high molecular weight polymer chain using condensation polymerization. So to achieve that, we use different kind of methods like apply of catalysis, physicochemical characterization, alteration. That is a complete different science which is required for getting a high molecular weight condensation polymerization reaction. So as I was talking about the ring opening, the addition polymerization, there are different kind of polymerization reactions. Say for example, step growth, step reaction, chain growth reaction, ring opening polymerization, where a polymerization mechanism in which a cyclic monomer opens each time it is attached in each growth step. So for example, there is an activating group, it's a nucleophile, which starts breaking this bond, so it activates it. So again this activating unit is here, so again it donates to another ring unit, they get conjugated together. So each time whenever there is a reaction step, one cyclic compound opens up, forms another polymer subunit, and it goes on till the reaction ends. So we have make a differentiating table how the chain growth polymerization and step growth polymerization happens, because step reactions are mostly more profound for the condensation polymerization, whereas chain reaction is more profound in case of addition polymerization. In case of addition polymerization, there are two more methods I would definitely like to talk about. In first case, when like how the reaction begins is a very important step. So in case of addition polymerization, what group activates the polymerization reaction? On the basis of that, we have developed some basic classification like radical polymerization. In case of a radical polymerization, what happens is that we use a peroxide or an azo compound which donates a singlet electron, because of which the initial bond just gets cleaved and it gets activated, and once activated there is no going back. So the termination either happens by coupling or a disproportionation of reaction, or otherwise we have to add a quencher which can take away that extra electron. So sometimes this chain transfer leads to branching, that is one chain to another chain on a side, like there is, once the reaction starts, many times what happens is it forms a chain reaction. That means from 1 there are 3 electrons, 3 to 7 electrons, and it does not need to be always going in the same direction. So there is sometimes chain transfer that leads to branching. So if we can control that using addition polymerization reaction, we can get those very interesting kind of structures like say brush like structure, comb like structure, those things we can do. In case of ionic polymerization, instead of a free radical or say a peroxide, we use electron rich alkanes, or say for example acids, Lewis acids for cationic intermediates, or otherwise we can use anionic intermediates like addition of nucleophiles. So either we can donate an electron so that it gets activated, or otherwise we can take away one so that also it can get activated. So Ziegler-Natta catalysis is one of the very famous catalysis system where we use some metal or metal alkoxides which actually catalyzes the reaction, and it can lead into highly linear polymers with minimal branching. Say for example high density polyethylene. So polyethylene works in an addition reaction, but as I was telling that there could be like small low density polyethylene. Then we can need in some cases, for example, like say medical implants, we need ultra high molecular polyethylene. So in those conditions we use metallic catalysis. Ziegler-Natta in 1950s they discovered a specific group of molecules which can enhance this kind of properties, and they can actually get highly linear polymers. So what they do is Ziegler-Natta catalysts can give a living polymerization. So even after the polymerization reaction ends, the reactive chain terminus remains active even after the all monomer is used. So in that condition we take it. If we can add more monomer, it can further get polymerized. So Ziegler and Natta actually they developed this catalyst. They are also used for some specific kind of reaction, like say stereoactive polymerization, where we want to modify the stereochemistry of polymers. Now there comes one more very important aspect of polymers which are required when we characterize polymerization process. So in case of a normal molecule, the molecular weight is fixed, because we know that if we sum up the number of atoms, we can find out the molecular weight. In case of polymers, there is a problem. We still do not know exactly what are the number of polymer subunits has been joined to form a single molecule. So there are different equations and different molecular weights for polymers. So there could be a simple average, like we know that there are say this many monomers actually was there. We consider that they has been completely used up. We divide it by the number of monomer subunits was originally present, and we get the simple number molecular weight number average molecular weight. So what happens is basically we can consider that it is something like that. If there were say 1000 molecules, we consider that is n. We know the mass of the material, we divide it by n, so we get the molecular weight. But actually the molecular weight of polymers are not that simple. It is really very much complex, because it could be that the entire weight of the polymer what we are getting, it could be distributed. How it is distributed? It could be something like that. Some of the polymer chains might be, say there are, the final weight is 1000, and we knew that there are say 50 monomeric units were there, and each one weighing 20. We consider that this is the way the polymeric chains are distributed. But it could be that there are 5 subunits which had 5, there could be 2 which had 10, there could be 1 which has 10 subunits, there could be 12 subunits in one chain. So we cannot say whether it is a single molecular weight. It could be a distribution. So we have to give weightage to the individual chains, and then we can find out the molecular weight. So considering that, we make a weighted average, and that is called MW, or weight average molecular weight, where we actually find out say X number of chains having molecular weight of 1, Y number of chain having molecular weight of 5. In that way we just sum all of them and then we divide it. So what we get is basically a molecular weight of weight average. Now for the number average molecular weight, we measure it using osmotic pressure. For weight average molecular weight, we measure it by dynamic lag scattering, or DLS. Now there is one more which is very much used for determining molecular weight of a polymer when we are doing some chemistry or something. that is called viscosity average molecular weight. It is used because it is easier to determine using the instruments like a blood viscometer, where we have this kind of a structure. We pour the first we use the solvent, and what we do, we pour it till this much. We take away some air from the top so that up to this the solution is filled. Then we leave it and we determine the individual solvent, just only the solvent, how much time it takes to go through this. We consider it as T0. Then we take different small lower viscosity concentration, low concentration polymer solution, say 0.1%, 0.01%, something like that. But the concentration is known to us, and we add through this column and we measure the same way. We take it till this, we start a stopwatch, and we take the time to find out how much does it take from this point to this point to move the polymer solution, because it moves through a very small capillary. And then once we determine this, that is T, what we can find out is that there are like a very famous equation which is made by Abelard, which is eta Sp equals to T minus T0 by T0, where eta Sp is your specific kinematic viscosity. He also found that this eta Sp also has a nonlinear relationship with the concentration and the kinematic viscosity of the solution. Now, for a very low concentration, which we are using this kind of study, eta Sp by C equals to K by eta. This K is a constant, and once we reach where this concentration tends to 0 or C tends to 0, then eta becomes eta 0 into T of rho by T0 or rho 0, where rho 0 is the density of the solvent, T0 is the elution time of the solvent, and eta 0 is the kinematic viscosity. So we can make a plot of eta Sp versus eta, and at C tends to 0, where we get the cut of eta by eta 0, we can find out value of the K, which is basically the intercept. So once we find the intercept, we can put it in this equation. So here K is known to us for a specific solvent, A is known to us, and M is the viscosity average molecular weight. So eta is the intrinsic viscosity we have already measured from this viscometry. We know K and we know A. So from that we can find out the viscosity average molecular weight, which is used for polymer processing in the entire world, which is a standard molecular weight. With respect to measurement of osmotic pressure or light scattering experiment, this experiment is easier. If we do it by statistically significant time, say n equals to 5 or 7, we can get a good distribution of MV, and then from that we can actually report it. Degree of polymerization, or dP, is the number of monomeric units in a macromolecular polymer or oligomer molecule which has been converted to a polymer. So it is a measurement of our reaction efficiency, how much of the monomeric units has been converted into a polymer. For a step growth polymerization, it can be determined using Carothers equation, where P is the monomer conversion factor, which can be determined experimentally, and dP equals to 1 by 1 minus P. Degree of polymerization is very important in measuring melting temperature of crystalline polymers, and also it was related to its properties of mechanical structures. So here we have shown a polyethylene's plot for melting temperature and degree of polymerization from Flory and Vrij. We can see that there is a kind of nonlinear relationship we can find out between melting temperature and degree of polymerization. It is important to note that as this is basically this is basically a addition polymerization. So as the degree of polymerization rises, so that means the chain becomes longer and longer, so it becomes more and more viscous, so automatically it cannot move much. So beyond a limit it becomes kind of constant. So beyond a limit it cannot grow further, so degree of polymerization remains static, so is the melting temperature. So till this point if we reach, when we cannot go further, we realize, we take different samples and do the melting temperature study. When we realize that we cannot get further melting temperature, we realize that it's time to stop the reaction, so we can get a ultra high molecular polyethylene sampling. So mechanical properties we can determine with respect to the structure. We can find out crystalline polymers. For the solid polymers which has a very higher degree of structural order or rigidity, amorphous polymers with a low degree of structural order, semi-crystalline polymers where most of the polymers consist of both crystalline domains and amorphous domains, but the property remains in between purely crystalline or purely amorphous polymer. Glass is a solid form of an amorphous polymer which is characterized by rigidity and brittleness, even though there is little order in the molecular level. And crystalline melting temperature is a property of a crystalline polymer. So at this temperature, all the crystalline polymer converts into a liquid and the entire polymer becomes molten and it is free flowing. So the entire order of the structure goes on something like, it becomes freely flowable. So in case of a crystalline polymer, the structures are completely ordered, so it cannot flow around each other. Once it gets heated, it starts flowing with loss of that structural rigidity. So that temperature is called TM or crystalline melting temperature. There is one more important temperature for the amorphous polymers, which is called glass transition temperature. In case of glass transition temperature, when an amorphous polymer is heated, as we have already mentioned in the previous slide, that amorphous polymer, when they are in solid form, they form a glass which is characterized by rigidity and brittleness. Now when it is heated, the temperature at which the polymeric structure turns into a viscous liquid or rubbery is called glass transition temperature. It is also defined as a temperature in which the amorphous polymers takes a characteristic glassy state temperature or brittleness or stiffness. So it is both sides, like it could be a liquid or rubbery polymer which can become TG, goes at TG and forms a glass, or a glassy temperature, glassy polymer turns it into a liquid or a rubbery structure. The transition from the glass to the rubber-like structure is an important feature of polymer behavior. So marking it marks a region of dramatic change in the physical properties such as hardness and elasticity. Some of the polymers are used below their TG in glassy state, like say polystyrene, PMMA, which are hard and brittle. Their TGs are higher than the room temperature, whereas some polymers are used above their TG or in rubbery state. For example, rubber elastomers like polyisoprene, polyisobutylene, they are soft and rubbery in nature. So looking at the polymers as material rather than a chemical point of view, several classifications are used in terms of temperature, like thermoplastics. Thermoplastics are linear or branch architecture that can be molten and reformed on heating. So they are soluble in organic solvents, say amorphous or no order structure over a relatively wide temperature, always lower than Tm, known as glass transition temperature. Above this temperature, the polymers are liquid, say polystyrene or polymethyl methacrylate. And semi-crystalline, which is composed of microscopic crystals or domains of crystalline structure which can be ordered. Semicrystalline polymers have true melting points because it has to, from a semi-ordered structure, it has to make a complete free flow like structure at Tm, and at which the ordered regions break up and become disordered. Say for example polyethylene, fibers like nylon or PET, polyester, etc. Thermosets or resin, massively cross-linked, very rigid, degrade on heating and insoluble in solvent, usually synthesized in mold and then shaped by machining, like say tires or rubber bands. So the physical property are like elastomers, moderately cross-linked and can be stressed or rapidly recover their original dimension. Structure-wise, thermoplastic polymers like elastic polymers that can be molten, say soles of tennis shoes or so, dendrimers which are multiply branched or multiply consecutive branches. So regarding the thermal mechanical properties and chemistry we have discussed today. In the next class, what I will talk about that how these properties are affecting for the polymers which are using in biomedical engineering or biomaterial science, be it contact lens, be it hard pulp, be it part of a hip implant, even it could be up to the level of 3D printing, tissue engineering, drug delivery, how we are using different kind of polymers, how we are using hydrogels. All of this we are going to discuss in the next class. Thank you.